consulting in San Diego, California. And with that, I will hand it over to Barb.
Hey, thanks so much, Jess. I appreciate that. And we are recording today's session, just like we did with session number 1. So if you want to get a hold of that after this is over, then it will be available to you as well. Just wanted to let you know that. And I do want to point this out, if you haven't done so already. We provided you with this key takeaway from part 1, the fundamentals of engagement, just to give you sort of a review handout of the last session. So if you haven't downloaded it, as Jess said, it's there available for you to share. And you may want to download it and have it available for you along with the other 2 items so that you can look at it as we're going through today's session. We will also demonstrate today a process. Let me get back to my slide here. We're going to demonstrate a process that you can use with your groups so that you can get closer to what we are talking about with this engagement. And we'll get to that process activity in a few minutes. But before we do that, we want to talk about what our plan is for today. And first of all, we want to define what is actively engaged, what is not engaged, and what is actively disengaged. Because what we're trying to do today, what we're going to be talking about throughout this session, is it's time to figure out how to move the needle. When we look at this picture here, how to move the needle from actively disengaged over to actively engaged. So we're hoping to have an active discussion on how to make this happen with our activity today. Additionally, we want to examine how the 3 levels of engagement, what we talked about in session 1, level 1, the person, level 2, the job attitude, and level 3, the engagement constructs. We want to talk about how those apply to the 3 types of engagement that we're introducing today. The actively engaged, the actively disengaged, and not engaged, psychologically disengaged is what we call, or unattached is what we call it. And then thirdly, we want to discuss various tools that you may already have in your toolkit, or others outside your wheelhouse that you can use to get your employees actively engaged. Gallup actually shows the following percentages that apply to workforce prior to COVID-19, that 18% were disengaged, 35% were actively engaged, and this number here, which is really quite astonishing, 47% not engaged, or what we call psychologically unattached. Of course, these are estimates, but it does give us an idea of what we can expect of our own organizations. But the question is, why? I want to know, why are people psychologically unattached? So, Jeanette, can you speak to the psychological components and how they relate to the engagement constructs that we're going to be working with in our process today?
You bet, Barb. So if you were in our session, our first webinar, we talked about employee engagement as being an individual construct. And so it really starts with the psychological components of engagement, and that's the person themselves. And so there's 3 components that we'll dive into, and these are really the foundational mindset of the person that really helps them to be motivated and really demonstrate those discretionary efforts when they're at their job, when they're on the job, or when they're doing anything just about in life. So these 3 constructs, these 3 psychological components of engagement we look at them, we took them from the work that's from William Kahn's earlier work in the 1990s, which really took a perspective of the whole person. And so looking at how to understand engagement, not just from, just this one view, but really 3 dimensions of a person. And that's to help define what these psychological components are. They're broken down into 3 different ones. The first one is meaningfulness, and that's the psychological meaningfulness that you feel worthwhile, useful in your job, that you're valuable and you're not taken for granted. The second one is the psychological availability, and that just is one's beliefs that they have the physical, emotional, and psychological resources that they can invest their job. So think of it a bilateral agreement between the individual and the organization, being able to really connect on that level to invest your full self. And then the safety part, you've probably heard about psychological safety. It's been in the literature for many years now from Amy Edmondson out of Harvard, and that's really the ability for one to express their self, their whole self, without feeling any retribution if they were to do that, that there would be negative consequences or anything that would come against them, whether it be for their career, self-image, or status. And so these three components help kind of define what Barbara talked about is level one when it comes to the person. So, what we've done for your teams to really help elevate your teams to kind of get to the root of these three psychological components, we've provided like a quick assessment tool that you were able to download. And this will help you to use, outside this webinar to think about these psychological components and really where not only you show up as an individual, but those in your team and those around you and where they might land on those different constructs. So that being said, let's do a fun little poll for ourselves. So using your text box that Jessica talked about, it should be the little arrow. If you click on that, you're able to change it to text. And what we'd like to do is just, on a scale 1 to 5, where do you see yourself in each one of these psychological components? So if you think about it, how valued do you feel at work? That's the meaningfulness on a scale 1 to 5. Availability, when it comes to being able to give your whole physical, emotional, and psychological self to your job, where would you rate yourself? And then when it comes to safety, how safe do you feel expressing your full self without any fear of negative consequences? So give a couple of minutes on a scale 1 to 5. Be transparent. It's that we don't know who writes what. You do get to see, I think, Barbara and Jessica's, but other than that, you can write whatever you want on a scale 1 to 5. And this is just a good pulse to figure out, where you rate yourself. Good, everybody's looking pretty good. We have a very engaged group. Nice. A lot of 5s. It's psychological safety. That's fantastic. Good. A little variety, a little bit, 4, still high, but for meaningfulness and for availability, good. All right. So as you can see, really this is just a means, and like I said, the download for you to take is really to help just kind of think about at the individual level where people might be starting from. Because if we think about the individual level, working within an organization, now we go to our second level, which really gets into job attitudes. And so job attitudes is a mechanism by which, we can use to elevate and empower employees to kind of challenge the norms and the status quo of systems that kind of hold us into this engagement hostage of not being able to be their full self and be engaged. And so if we think about these different job attitudes, they lay on top of the level 1, which is the psychological components. And what these job attitudes, these mechanisms, is what you'll find mostly in the literature and where you'll find them in buckets in terms of employee engagement surveys. So if you think about job demand, it's really about the resource, job demand and resources, really about the perceived working conditions. And so that might be stuff as far as like the group resources, leadership resources, organizational resources, and how those kind of come together to kind of make up, whether something is hindering your job, meaning you can't get it done, or challenges kind of pushing the status quo as we think about so many business models being pivoted with the pandemic. Another one is job satisfaction, and that's really the outlook about the job, maybe the team engagement, task engagement, Job characteristics would be job satisfaction. Job involvement is really about the degree to which someone identifies in a central to their identity, and that kind of gets into the belongingness or feeling part of the tribe, whether that be in a team or a larger setting. Organizational commitment is the emotional attachment to one's job. That's not only just being engaged by the organization, but also some of the organizational characteristics of behavior and citizenship that one might demonstrate. And then the whole being is, it really gets at a multitude of things. It's not just about the whole being as just well-being as a given word, but something that deals with their physical well-being, as well as their community, their social well-being, their career well-being, and financial well-being. So all of these different components come together that make up what we call job attitude. So we have, in the level 1, we have the psychological components. Level 2, we have the job attitudes. And so what we want to do is these mechanisms, these job attitudes, are a great means by which we can engage people at that individual level. So what we're going to do now is Barb is going to take us through a process that we're going to be able to kind of look at these different job attitudes and come up with some creative ways the collective group can learn more about them and how we can work better together. Barb, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. So again, I want to point out that we've provided you a check sheet of these 5 job attitudes that Jeanette's just been talking about, and that we talked about in session 1. If you haven't done so already, please download it now so you have it, so you can use it as we're walking through today. And as you look at this, keep in mind that this is not an all-inclusive list. We're simply providing you with a couple of ideas to get you started. But we realize, based on your organization, based on your teams, there are probably many more ways to engage your employees. And so in the interest of time today, we're going to practice and focus on the first 3 of these constructs that you see here for our activity. Let me go back to the slides. Oops, I was there, sorry. And go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, super. So what we're doing is we'd like to have each of you to contribute to each construct what you would recommend or you've seen done within your organization for each of the 3 job attitudes that we're going to talk about. Besides your check sheet, we've provided you with an example at the bottom of each of the slides to get you started. You're going to be using your text tool below to write what are some things that you've seen to get job satisfaction, to get people engaged with that particular construct. We're going to give you 2 minutes to share what you think would be a good way to promote each of the constructs. And then we're going to review what everyone came up with before moving on to the next engagement construct. Now, FYI, we will be capturing the screens with everyone's responses, and we'll share with you after the webinar so that you can actually see what everyone has come up with. We do have a protocol that we're using, which means that once we get started here, I'm going to maintain silence to allow you to focus on your answers until it's time for us to debrief after those 2 minutes. And if you'd also let us know that you've completed your response by giving us a thumbs up using that hand at the bottom and selecting the one that says, yes, I agree. I believe that's the thumbs up. Where's my camera? Thumbs up to let us know that you've completed it as well. So in case everybody finishes before the 2 minutes, that we can go ahead and start looking at what you guys have put up. So let's go ahead, get started with job attitude number 1, job satisfaction. What can you do to engage others based on job satisfaction? Before we start, are there any questions about what we're doing here? Just to be clear. I'm not seeing anything. So give it a go. Use your text tool. And what sort of things have you seen done? got lots of room here on the screen, so you can spread yourself out. We got about 45 seconds left on the clock. Thanks for that thumbs up. And time is up. Are you seeing what I'm seeing, Jeanette?
Yeah,
lots of comments on feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Provide feedback on team members' accomplishments, receive acknowledgement or feedback for accomplishing a goal. I saw something else about that in regards to communication and appreciation. And then also clear expectations. We got celebration. So important. Sometimes we forget how important it is to celebrate those wins along the way. And it really does help individuals to feel that satisfaction for what they've done. Transparency and company performance. Excellent. Be sure to touch base with employees on there's that feedback again, regular basis, aligning meaningful work with team members with related goals, and continually looking at what are the goals of the organization so that people know how what they're doing ties into what the organization is doing. The interesting thing is when you start looking at the 5 constructs, there's a lot of interrelationship between the 5 that we start to see. Sometimes you might say, well, there's redundancy. Well, it's intentional. Not everything happens in one construct. They sort of all fit together, and sometimes the pieces fit together. But there are certainly distinct parts of each of the 5 job attitudes that we can pick out, and I'm seeing those here. I do have a question for you all in regards to this particular construct. If you could answer in chat for me, why do you think that job satisfaction is so important to engagement? So if you could switch over from the whiteboard over to your chat area and type in chat, why is job satisfaction so important to engagement? Why do you think it is? Skilled workers can reasonably go elsewhere, so you need to keep them on top of this. Yeah, we don't always think about that. I remember talking to a CEO at one point who said to me, I said, you really need to make sure that everybody's engaged so that you keep them happy and content so they want to stay working here. And the CEO said to me, I don't think that's necessary. I can always go and hire somebody else. And I thought, oh, how short-sighted of you. I didn't say that to him, but I was thinking it. How short-sighted of you. How much time and effort does it take to train a new person in an organization? All of the things that are going on there, the organizational aspects, the goals, the values, whatever it happens to be. To keep a positive attitude about work and life, tied to motivation, If a team member is satisfied in their job, they will feel more confident and empowered to engage. Absolutely. All of these things. This is the reason we want to keep people engaged. And the more we can do to engage them on a daily basis, as somebody who's a team leader, as somebody who is a project leader, as somebody who is just working with your colleague, we all have a tendency, especially in this time of COVID, to forget how important it is to engage our friends that at work. What can we do to help engage those people at work? So let's move on to the next one. Number 2, job demands, resources. Our example that we're giving you, challenge others. Remember, you have your sheet. You can look at that as well. Perceive work conditions, what's hindering or challenging you from doing the work. So once again, take your text tool out. We're going to give you 2 minutes on the clock. Starting now. Once again, when you've completed that, if you can give us a thumbs up to let us know that you're done. Certainly, if you want to provide more than one response, we'll take those. About 45 minutes left on the clock. Two, one, time's up. Thank you so very much. Let's see what we've got here. I see things related to training, provide appropriate training, and time. I don't remember. I was talking to somebody, I think it was on a podcast, but I was talking about time and the importance of allowing people enough time to do their work. And, especially as somebody who has spent a good part of my career as an instructional designer and being asked to put together different training programs. And people will come to me and they don't know what it involves to put together particular training programs. I mean, Jeanette and I have been working on this particular webinar for the last 4 weeks. It's not something that you do in a day or an hour or a half hour. And yet time always seems to be something, whether it's putting together a training program, putting together something else, something that we have a tendency to shortcut for our employees. We need to allow them to do what they need to do the way they need to do it. Give them the time. Not to be somebody who's an analysis paralysis, perhaps, that takes too long, but to give them enough time so that they can do the work. Organization provides, and I can't read the word there. What is that? Can somebody text what that is that ran off the screen? Whoever wrote that.
If I'm looking, Barbara, it might just,
yeah.
I'm playing Wheel of Fortune here with the letters, but it might be the organization provides resources.
Resources. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. And, especially now in time of COVID, and we got thrown into work environments like this, where we're working from home. We don't necessarily have the equipment we need, or we don't necessarily, and by equipment, chair to sit in, desk to sit at, you got a computer that seems to go along with the job. But are we giving everybody what they need in order to be able to do the work? Did they have a printer at home? So those are types of things that key leadership probably need to be looking at as well. Let's see, clear expectations, saw that. Boundaries. So important for boundaries. When I think of boundaries, I think of my office space. I think of putting a sign up on the door at 5 o'clock and leaving. What do you think about, Jeanette?
I like it. Time just runs the clock, and so next thing you know, 5 o'clock is 8 o'clock.
Exactly. And I learned early on, because I've been doing this remote kind of work for probably close to 26, 27 years. And I learned early on, somebody told me, they said, Barbara, you have to set boundaries for yourself. You have to set office hours for yourself. And so those are the sort of things we need to actually do for our employees, to engage them, to let them know that they need to do those things for themselves as well. So I'm going to turn over slide number 3, engagement, job attitude, to Jeanette.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. So when we think about job involvement, it's the degree to which one's job is central to your identity. And oftentimes we get caught up in saying, you know, I'm a professor, I'm an instructional designer, I'm an engineer, I'm a neuroscientist. And so sometimes those involvement, the job involvement, it goes beyond just identifying to a title, but rather the sense of belongingness. So we want to kind of brainstorm with you about ways that you've been able to help people, bring them along and helping them feel like they belong to not only the organization as a whole, but maybe just the immediate team that you're working with. And one example or suggestion we had was, suggest an idea to a team and then let them run with it. So are there things that you can share with the group about how you've been able to bring people along in their job involvement by either having them feel like they're a sense of the tribe, feel a sense of belonging in the team, especially when we're so dispersed in terms of being remote. So let's get some ideas out there and learn from one another. We're going to put 2 minutes on the clock. It's a tough one. Good job. So if you're done, you can give us a thumbs up, but if not, keep going. We have 20 seconds on the clock and some really great ideas. Two, one. All right, time's up. These are great. Just looking at some of the things that you guys have written, brainstorm ideas with others. I don't know about you, but connectedness right now is on top of my list. As a strong extrovert, I miss people. So just brainstorming ideas, having people to check in with. I think we see some stuff. Stay connected. Sometimes using video on Teams calls, and just just checking in with people, asking them questions about what they need. When was the last time someone just called you and said, "Hey, Barbara, what do you need today?" So those little things don't cost anything except for a little bit of our time, but they really go a long way. Listening to ideas from everyone, especially when we might have some more brain power to think about creative ideas, but we have no outlet to share them. Short check-ins. We have a couple of stuff. Give employees the big picture. Definitely. I think sometimes with uncertainty right now, not knowing how they identify with their job, especially with some organizations that are struggling financially, not being able to give, big first, second, third quarter of next year kind of timeline of what's happening. So just anytime that we can stay connected and be able to provide any kind of next steps helps them to feel that they identify with their organization in terms of the belongingness and connected with it. For programmers, don't dictate the specific solutions, but let the team come up with them. Yeah. So once again, it's a job involvement. If we think about it as a skill of creativity, allowing for curiosity and conversations and connectedness to take place. That really draws that one-on-one involvement, feeling that you're part of the tribe. I don't know about you, Barbara, but I like when people ask my opinion or they want me to be involved, because it makes me feel like, wow, thanks, someone appreciates. And it really kind of goes back, if you think about it, to that psychological meaningfulness that we talked about as the first level of engagement. So you can see how these components of job attitudes really relate back to the first level, which is the psychological components of a person. So these are just tools and techniques that Barbara, we've been going through as a process that you can really use to get multidimensional in terms of engagement. So using your chat, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some of the things, if you think about it, what are ways that you can help people feel belonging right now? Besides what we wrote here, like just think deep, like about for you, what would you need right now to feel like your organization, you belong to it, and that you're part of the tribe? Anything in particular that would stand out to you? Might be to the goals of the organization, the following steps of what's happening first, second, third quarter next year. We don't even talk about fourth quarter yet. Okay. Nothing come to mind. This is deep. Let's go. Have a team meeting. Turn on video so you can actually see one another. Yeah, it's amazing how many video chat conferences I've been at and people aren't putting up their video, and I feel not as connected with them as I do with the people who show their video. So really great point. Give everyone a chance to help outside their wheelhouse. Absolutely. This is a great time to expand your skills. Once again, going back to creativity, thinking about how to add contribution to the organization in maybe different ways that the organization hasn't done in the past. Good. Nicely done. So with that being said, I want to kind of, there are the two other job attitudes. That's the organizational as well as organizational commitment as well as well-being. And so we're not going to get into those today. What we'd like to do is kind of debrief, with you guys, what are some of the things that you've identified? So we talked about the individual components, psychological components. We talked about these job attitudes, how they go together, and how the job attitudes actually act as a mechanism to really get down deep with the psychological component. So love to hear in the chat what kind of thoughts or ideas that you've taken away or have kind of considered in terms of where you'd like to take this information and how you'd like to apply it to some kind of change you're working on.
And if you'd like to come off mute and talk to us versus chatting, if you could let us know in the chat that you're interested in doing that, we can take you off.
I like the chat. Nobody's chatting with us.
It takes it. Oh, Betsy's up there.
Nice. Come chat with us.
You know, one of the things to think about too is we can practice what we're talking about here with our personal acquaintances, friends, family, to get used to doing these type of things for getting engagement going. I try to remember that. I have close friends that are going through some rough times and they tend to check out. And how do I engage with those people as well? So we can use them as a practice tool. Doesn't always have to be about engaging our fellow employees. It can certainly be about engaging people we love and are close to.
Hi, this is Betsy. I think you can hear me, right?
Hi, Betsy.
Hi. I know our team and some other teams that I'm aware of at Epsilon are in a particular situation where we've been on long-term projects for, almost 20 years, and they're ending. Clients are some of our clients are slowly walking away. So that's a very specific challenge as a leader to overcome that hurdle. And, even sadder, business has gotten so impersonal lately that the people in your customer your customers that you've known for 20 years, they're walking away too. Some of them are walking away without saying goodbye. Mm. So it is a distinct challenge psychologically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is, Betsy, to your point, I think that's a really important, thinking about like keeping just engaged or just keeping mentally healthy is to be able to think about those three psychological components, because sometimes it's a process for people to debrief what's going on and being able to reframe maybe some of the, points of what looks like, the end, it's kind of a bend in the road kind of thing, and where the creativity or the collective wisdom, as well as the, we learn from social learning theory that we are social beings, and knowing that there's people alongside that we can, shoulder to shoulder. There's a client I used to work with, and we used to call elbows in leadership, where it was like we are shoulder to shoulder in everything we do. It's amazing how that will not only engage people to want to come up with great solutions, but creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens by people sharing ideas, and that's that psychological well-being that kind of gets at a whole different level. But if you think about those three psychological components and kind of hone in on that and find out where your team is, I think you'll be able to come up with some really amazing things that just come out of touching base on a very intimate level.
I think a really key thing that I specifically talked with Jeff about going into this transition period the last year and a half is taking the high road and acting very professional. Mm-hmm. And I've had an absolute ton of feedback from the client that they've been so appreciative that we've handled this so nicely. We could have been kind of nasty about it, but we chose not to be on purpose. And that has been positive for the mental health aspect of it. It still stinks, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're saying that this is perfect. Especially this time is really it adds on a whole new dynamic that we didn't have when we were able to see each other and be in person, and now that we're not able to do that, and with the clients as well having that same sort of thing. I experienced the same sort of thing, Betsy, as you with our Epsilon clients, that I had one client who was so extremely busy doing what they need to do to keep up that they were unable to do what they needed to do to improve their situation to make it better. So they're so caught up in trying to get their work out, because in their case they're dealing with COVID, they're dealing with trials of drugs, and providing training for that. And they're so busy doing that what they brought me in to help them with, which was actually to come up with ways to improve on their training materials, they were unable to do. And so we had to take a step back from that. So I've seen it too. And it does become frustrating for us as leaders that are working through this with our clients and employees, but we have to stay positive. And I appreciate the fact that you're saying that you're staying positive and staying professional and upright has made a difference for the clients. And hopefully at some point what that does is it brings the clients back to us when we're out of this craziness.
Good point. Nicely said, Barbara. Anybody else want to come off mute? Kirsten brought up a good suggestion, and that's the importance of the communication among the team members and the team leadership. And if we go back to thinking about which we didn't get to, is the organizational commitment, and that's really the emotional attachment to one's organization. Being able to understand on an individual level how I contribute to the greater good and how of the organization and how that organization is going to contribute to my greater good. Bilateral relationship, once again, going back to that psychological meaningfulness, feeling that I'm valued and that I'm worth something. And to Barbara's point, when she gave the example of the CEO she was working with, I was like, yeah, just the next person. The importance of knowing that you're just not another person and we can replace you, which technically is the case. But that institutional knowledge that goes with anyone who's been with an organization can hinder the organization in many ways in terms of being able to give the background and not make the same mistakes that they made in the past because they've ever worked through that. So definitely the team member communication is pretty important. Any other thoughts or ideas about, either the psychological components or the job attitudes, things that you've maybe kind of maybe new to you or maybe something that you've seen differently? Oh, here we go. Justin just said engaging interns. Interns is sometimes a challenge that tends to be a yes people and sometimes shy, limited collaboration at times. Yeah, that's, everyone who shows up at your organization has the psychological components attached to it. We all have psychological contracts of what we want. We only speak about them when they're broken, which is where conflict management comes in. So, get to the waterfall before it drops over the edge. That's the stream up the way, and be able to get in front of it by having open conversations, dialogues, and meeting those components, knowing that we all have them.
And I think it's important to realize that you need to become an advocate for doing what we're talking about here, that you have to start treading the water within your organization to ask the right questions of your leaders and to start doing different initiatives or even if it's discussions or of people that you work with, that if simply because someone might not appear to be engaged, don't write them off. Stop and ask, how can I engage them? And if you want to be one of the people that makes a difference in your organization, then you have to step up and be that person. And we applaud you when you are that person, because so many people take the easy road out and just disengage. And that's what we're trying to get away from, is that not psychologically involved, step off the planet. We want you involved. We want you engaged. We want you to start thinking about, how can I get others to think this way and to make a difference in the organization? Ultimately, I mean, if that's the corporate culture from up high on down, that everybody is concerned about engaging each other and communicating with each other and keeping everybody in the know and being transparent and looking for ways to provide resources and help others. And if we provide all 5 of these psychological components and job at 5 and 3, the 3 components and the 5 job attitudes, then what we're going to see is that it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a difference for all of us, but we have to take the initiative. And if we don't take the initiative, then it may not happen.
Yep, 100%, he says. So that's the reality is when Barb showed the bell curve and the mass amount of people, the 47% that sit under the bell curve.
I'm going to go back there.
Psychologically safe, or not psychologically attached, rather. The idea between engagement versus non-engagement is sometimes we focus too much on those that are non-engaged and miss those people that are psychologically unattached. Now, that does not mean that they're not doing a great job that they want to do, but they just aren't psychologically attached. And that's why we went to the first, if we go to the first principle, why aren't people psychologically attached? And it's because we're not meeting that meaningfulness, that availability, and that safety that one can bring their whole self to their job. So our premise, or what we're hoping, is that you'll start to think about those psychological components as a means, through the job attitudes, to really kind of, push that bell curve, to the positive tail, that we start to get more engaged, actively engaged, because we know from, like I had mentioned, attitude, when we talk about attitudes are contagious. If I have a good attitude, if I give good expectations are going to happen, because without expectations, behaviors don't change. So as leaders in our work, if we think about, and I want to say leadership, because leadership happens in all parts of the organization. It's not a formal role. If we think about leadership as a means to help really move the engagement of people feeling psychologically attached or psychologically engaged in their job, that's moving that non-engaged up to that engaged. And that's where we're trying to put the focus, as opposed to maybe those people that are just actively disengaged. Perhaps if we focus on where people are at individually, those that are on the lower tail of the bell curve, we'll start to see that there's an attitude change in the organization's relationship with the individuals. So that being said, I think, Barbara, we can kind of open it for any questions or answers, that we could possibly provide, not only to what we talked about today, but anything that anybody wants to open up to discuss. We have a couple of minutes before we close it up. Feel free to chat it up in the chat bar, or if you'd like to come off mute, just let us know. Barbara, any questions?
I have no questions, but I just wanted to remind everybody once again that we have provided them with these 3 tools today. And, our hope is that you take this process that we've shown you today and walk away with it, trying it on all the 5 job attitudes with folks that you work with, to try and engage them in doing what they do on the job, so that they want to be there both mentally and physically. I mean, I think that's the most important part of this whole thing, is how do we engage somebody mentally and physically so that they truly want to show up for work and be there eventually when we get into the office, but now even in our meetings, whether they be on Teams or whether they be on Zoom, how do we get them there and that they are involved in the meeting that you're having, that they're not doing 16 things while you're talking to them in a Zoom meeting. So what do we need to do in order to be able to get those folks engaged? And whether they be our employees or whether they be our clients, what do we need to do? It comes to memory of a time when I worked for an organization in Miami, Florida, and it was one of the most challenging experience that I had, but what made it less hindering for me was the fact that the CEO was very, very transparent and told everybody within the organization what was going on within that organization, and continually updated us on a daily basis as to what was happening. And that was Burger King Corporation. It was a fast food industry. And we knew what the advertisements were going to be even before the burger commercials came out on the TV. And it was a very competitive time. And I remember I had such fond memories of working in that environment because I was so actively engaged, both physically and mentally, that I showed up for work on Saturdays when I wasn't paid to, because I felt that they valued my help and what I needed to do, and that I was making a difference and a part in the organization. And that's really what we're talking about here, is how do we get everybody to do that? So love to hear if anybody has, love the tools. Thank you, Betsy. I do have a quick survey for everybody as well. If you'd like to give us some feedback, I'll put that up in just a minute. But any other things that you might have questions about, or you can always reach out to Jeanette and myself. I'll put the emails up in just a sec with any questions that you might have. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Interesting in knowing what your own engagement gaps are. Yeah, for sure. Because I bet anything, and I see somebody's hands are still up. I don't think we erased them, but question for you that I would have is, give me a hands up, give me a thumbs up if during this period of COVID you find yourself unengaged 3 or 4 times a week with your work. It doesn't have to be all day, but at some point you're not engaged. Because I know my hand's up. You know, there are days when I just have to get up. and I don't mean out of the bed. I mean, I have to get myself up.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's hard to focus.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So knowing your own state and where you are is going to help you to help others, I think. So I just wanted to let you all know that we are brainstorming ideas for the 3rd session, and we'll share with you what we're doing going forward. It looks like 2021 early is when that's going to be happening, but we'll let you know sometime in January what our plans are there. Please feel free to reach out to Jeanette and myself and Jessica as well. We will be sending out the recording. Additionally, we will send out the handouts, and we'd love to hear from everybody what you've got going. I'm going to go ahead and put the survey up so that you can give us some feedback. 2 questions. And I'll send you a screenshot from all the different things that we did today too. So you'll get that as well. Uh-oh, we have to go. The clock's going off.
Sorry about that. Sorry about my clock.
Jess is coming back on.
Everybody, yeah, I'm just going to close this out here. Thank you all so much for attending. If you had a chance to fill out the survey, great. Don't feel like you have to stay. Again, if things come to mind a little bit later, feel free to email us with questions. I'll be sending all of the pieces out that we covered in the webinar probably in the next day or so. You can respond to that email as well. We really appreciate your engagement and hope that you took something away.